Good morning. We close? Okay. Well, that's easy enough then. It was my job to quiet the room and get everybody ready for the special presentation. You good? Okay, thank you. The legislature must be back in town because a big storm blew through yesterday. But we're looking forward to an exciting year because last year it brought us great news here in the Midlands. And this group that networks together and works together so well and has done the right things every day for so long has put us in a place where the Midlands is about to be poised for great growth. And so we thank each of you for all you do. I'm David Adams. I work with government affairs with MUSC, the presenting sponsor of this breakfast every month, and is so happy to be here with you. We are proud to be a part of the growth that is coming here, and I hope that you'll keep us in mind and you'll keep me in mind if you ever need anything, have any questions, or anything you ever need with MUSC in the Midlands, statewide or otherwise. Please call on me, call on us. We're here to help. We're here to be a part of the growth in the future. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the morning's presentation.
Thanks, David. Good morning. How's everybody? It's really early, and I really can't see a thing. So anyway, I'm Carl Blackstone on behalf of the Columbia Chamber. We really appreciate y'all being here. We got a great program for y'all this morning. But I tell you what, when we have all this many people coming at one time, you know, it took a lot of people to get this to happen. So I really want to thank our friends at the State Chamber, our friends at the Casey West Columbia Chamber and the Greater Lexington Chamber for helping put this on today. The four of us do a lot together, but it's nice when we can tie it all together and talk about business in the Midlands, and nothing actually brings us more together than the Port of Charleston, and the Port of South Carolina is just a great asset, so we're thrilled that Barbara Melvin is here today to join us. Before I forget, I do want to thank MUSC again and Blue Cross Blue Shield for their support of our time together today. But on to our program. I really was thinking about what to say about my friend Barbara Melvin. Barbara and I have known each other for longer than we both want to admit that we... But Barbara and I started working together in the mid-'90s, and we were both at the Charleston Chamber at the time. And Barbara surely has a sound, fundamental understanding of what business needs by her time working at the Chamber in Charleston and understanding advocacy work back in the 90s. And she has progressed mightily. She actually gives all lobbyists hope that there's life after the days of lobbying. But Barbara certainly earned her stripes at the State House, overseeing the expansion of the port, the deepening of the harbor. I mean, all these huge projects Barbara has overseen, not only as day-to-day running the legislative team at the port, but also as chief operations officer. So she's done all this work. She knows the port backwards and forwards. She's a dynamite when it comes to building relationships, in which we talk about all the time. Relationships are the key in South Carolina, and understanding not only what businesses' needs are, but what environmentalists need and what legislators feel like they need. So she brings all these accolades together, and she's the perfect fit for running the port right now. As a father of 4 daughters, also proud to say she is the only female CEO of a ports authority in the top 10 ports across the country. So really proud of Barbara, and we're excited that she could be here early this morning to join us. So welcome. Glad to have you.
Wow, you really can't see. This might be the only time I have an angelic halo. So we're going to roll with that for a while. Carl, thank you so much for that introduction. Carl's right. All good business policy is born from a chamber. And so if you get this training, you know exactly what we need to do to create a business environment in South Carolina that's going to allow us to succeed. And wow, are we succeeding? I mean, I just read the press release from the Department of Commerce about their performance in economic development, supported by everybody in this room, by the way. How great is it that MUSC was able to sponsor this morning? They're a great partner of ours. Also, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they take care of all of our employees at the port. So this is just a great opportunity. And look at what we're doing as a state. $10 billion in 22, and just a bit shy of that record year in 2023. That's really hard to duplicate. And yet, small South Carolina is continuing to swing well above our weight. And it's really because we are investing in the basics. And the basics are good business policy, great pro-business legislators, and infrastructure. And that's every piece of infrastructure that you can think of, because one piece of an infrastructure chain can't outshine other pieces, otherwise there are bottlenecks. And so the port is one piece of why South Carolina is succeeding. So actually, probably the folks who wrote my remarks are like, could you just stick to your remarks? So here we go. Good morning. Thank you so much to the Columbia Chamber of Commerce for hosting us today. It's just a great opportunity, and we drew a great crowd. I think this is due to Joey, frankly. We appreciate your partnerships as well as support of the South Carolina Chamber. Bob, I saw you earlier, the Lexington Chamber and Visitor Center, as well as the Greater KC West Columbia Chamber of Commerce. I want to share our gratitude to everyone who worked so hard to build this successful South Carolina. Thank you to our port team and our maritime community, elected leaders, business leaders, community partners, economic developers, and of course, our incredible port customers. We are nothing without you. We are stronger because of these partnerships. At South Carolina Ports, we are fortunate to have a board of directors who provide great wisdom and guidance and leadership, especially our board chairman, Bill Stern, as well as board members Pamela Lackey, Coach Willie Jeffries, and Felicia Howard, all who reside right here in the Midlands. So you are well represented on the South Carolina Ports Authority Board. And of course, a big thank you to all the elected leaders who strategically support our port's growth. We would not be the number 8 container port in the country without the steadfast support that we receive from Governor Henry McMaster, our congressional delegation, and our General Assembly. We strategically invest in our port system to create a more fluid supply chain. By deepening our harbor to 52 feet, which you all supported steadfastly, and supporting our vision to build a near-dock, rail-served cargo yard, South Carolina Ports is better equipped to support the businesses and communities around our state. We will open this rail yard, it's called the Navy Base Intermodal Facility, in July of 2025, which helps us further speed goods to market. These critical investments enable us all to grow responsibly together. I would like to recognize all the elected leaders, local, state, and federal, for all you do for South Carolina. Please join me in a round of applause. Our port system is a big economic connector and economic driver for our state. Alongside many maritime and logistics partners, we work every day to keep freight moving for our port-dependent businesses throughout South Carolina and beyond. Freight knows no state borders. We are dedicated to efficiently loading and unloading container ships to ensure imports and exports swiftly arrive at their destinations. South Carolina Ports is a port for the entire state, and you can see that with every impact we have throughout the regions of South Carolina. In Charleston, we run several marine terminals and handle containers filled with goods such as toys, electronics, furniture, appliances, clothing, refrigerated and frozen foods, medicine, lumber, paper, and manufacturing parts. In fiscal year 23, we handled nearly 2.6 million containers. Essentially, if you want to know why this matters to you, if you're shopping in local stores or buying things online, which we're all doing, those goods likely come through a port. South Carolina Ports also runs a break bulk terminal in Charleston that handles cargo that's too big to fit into a container. We move thousands of vehicles for global automakers and massive pieces of machinery every day. Last fiscal year alone, we handled about 189,000 fully set up vehicles. Beyond the Lowcountry, South Carolina Ports owns and operates 2 rail-served inland ports in the upstate and in the PD region. Inland ports Greer and Dillon enable more goods to move to and from the Port of Charleston via rail, which provides quick access to these inland markets. In the Midlands, we support advanced manufacturers, retailers, healthcare companies, and paper producers. We move cargo for large companies like Michelin, Samsung, and for smaller companies like Foltex and soon Scout Motors. We are proud to support thousands of companies and jobs in the Midlands. Having a top 10 container port in South Carolina enables our existing companies to flourish, and it attracts new businesses and opportunities for our state. This all results in more jobs for South Carolinians. Every container you see represents economic opportunity. We study our economic impact and growth every 5 years, and I'm proud to say that the number of jobs connected either directly or indirectly to our port has seen dramatic growth. I'm now going to turn things over to Dr. Joey Von Nessen, an esteemed research economist based right here in Columbia at the University of South Carolina Darla Moore School of Business, who will dive into the data for us and share more about our exciting updates. Please welcome Dr. Joey Von Nessen.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, I tell you what, I wish I had my sunglasses. I want to pull them out, and that'd be really, really cool. I've never been able to do that before in a presentation, wear sunglasses. Well, it's great to be here this morning. Thank you, Barbara, for that kind introduction, and it's great to be with all of you. Again, my name is Joey Von Nessen, and I am a research economist with the Darla Moore School of Business, where we practice what I always like to call so what economics. And I use that term regularly, and some of you have heard me use it before, half jokingly, but always to make a serious point, that we're always looking at economic data and asking the question, so what? How can we use economic data to help businesses and organizations make good strategic decisions? That's really our MO. And anytime you're looking to make a strategic decision, particularly in the realm of economic development, either as a local region or for the state as a whole, you first have to understand the business landscape that you find yourself in and the organizations and businesses that do the most to generate economic growth in the region that you're trying to develop and trying to examine, either at the local level or at the state level. And so I'm very pleased to be able to share with you this morning the research that we've done in conjunction with the South Carolina Ports Authority over the last several months, documenting their impact and their reach on the state of South Carolina, which is very broad-based and significant. So I want to share the main results with you over the next few minutes this morning. And when we look at the data overall and look at the impact throughout the state in a number of different ways, the principal conclusion, the main conclusion, is very simple and very clear. And that's that SC Ports is a principal asset of South Carolina's economy. Very straightforward, very simple. That is the bottom line. And so what I want to do is go through 4 key points that really illustrates this bottom line this morning. How can we actually see this demonstrated every day in South Carolina, both in the Midlands and for the state as a whole? The first way that we can see this is if we look at SC Ports, we see that it is able to support the business activities of industries that are primarily responsible for South Carolina's long-run economic growth. So think about that. SC Ports is responsible for facilitating business activities and industries that are primarily responsible for the state's growth. Well, that begs the question, what are the industries that are primarily responsible for South Carolina's growth. There are many, of course, but we can broadly define this into two major categories. Advanced manufacturing, as you see here. I think we went a little too far there. See if we can go back. There we go. Advanced manufacturing and retail and distribution-based businesses. These are the big two. So advanced manufacturing, let's take them and let's go through each one individually. Advanced manufacturing. This is a term, of course, we're all very familiar with in South Carolina. Advanced manufacturing is an informal term that we use for the automotive sector, for the aerospace sector, and for the tire industry, and all of the businesses that collectively support these three industries. So we call that, as a whole, the advanced manufacturing cluster. And if we look at this cluster, it's been principally responsible. It's been the main driver of economic growth in South Carolina over the last decade and even further back. And this has been a major driver for the state. And oh, by the way, advanced manufacturing is export-oriented in South Carolina, meaning that in order to do business here, manufacturers need a robust supply chain. They also have a globally based supply chain, and they are exporting manufactured goods all over the world. So South Carolina port facilities are critical to support advanced manufacturing that we see in South Carolina, the growth that has been experienced over the past decade. Secondly, we can also look at retail and distribution-based businesses. Now, advanced manufacturing is a term, of course, we're all generally familiar with, but we don't necessarily think of retail and distribution-based businesses as a primary driver of growth off the top of our heads the way we associate advanced manufacturing sometimes with South Carolina. But nevertheless, this is an industry segment that is growing in importance and is one reason why the port is going to be even more important for long-run economic growth over the next decade than it even has been over the previous decade. Why is this the case? It comes down largely to population growth. We are seeing more population growth currently in the southeastern United States than any other region of the country, and that is a trend that has developed over the last decade and is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. If we look at most economic forecasts with respect to migration patterns, including the census, we see that projections suggest that this region of the country will see more growth than any other over the next 2 decades, through at least the year 2040. So what does that mean for us? Well, if more people are moving to this region of the country, that means more consumers that are going to need goods that are shipped to them. Think about all the products that we buy from Amazon and buy from Walmart and so forth online that need to be shipped to our doorstep. That demand is going to grow in the coming decades significantly as we see more people move to this region of the country. And that means that businesses, retail and distribution-based businesses, are going to be attracted to the Southeast. They're going to want to be here, and they're going to want to be where they have access to port facilities. And that makes South Carolina a prime location to become the logistics hub of the Southeast as we move forward in the next decade. Again, showing that the South Carolina Ports Authority is becoming more and more of a critical asset for the long-run growth of the state. So we can look at two elements here, advanced manufacturing and retail and distribution-based businesses, and you can clearly see how the port enables and facilitates growth in both of these sectors. So very briefly then, let's look at some data that will illustrate these trends. So I'll just briefly share with you some data in advanced manufacturing, again, where you can clearly see the growth over the previous decade and how it has been the principal driver for South Carolina. Very clearly, if we look at just the aggregate growth numbers since 2010, far and away faster growth in advanced manufacturing compared to the state as a whole, about 95% compared to 27%, bringing up the average growth rate for South Carolina as a whole. And then if we zoom out a bit more, we can also see that advanced manufacturing in South Carolina has been growing at a faster rate than any other southeastern state. The advanced manufacturing cluster, we can look at the cluster in every southeastern state, and South Carolina here ranks #1. So very strong growth that we've seen over the previous decade. In terms of retail and distribution-based businesses, we can look at population trends. Again, what we were talking about before, that the southeastern United States is projected to grow faster than any other region of the country over the next 2 decades. This just shows you some basic data to illustrate that point. Also keep in mind that the majority of the country, about two-thirds of the country, lives east of the Mississippi River. Right, about two-thirds of the U.S. population. So already we have the bulk of the population in this area, in this region of the country, and now we're going to see more and more concentration within the Southeast. So again, very important and a lot of opportunity for South Carolina to become the logistics hub of the Southeast. And if we look at South Carolina individually, if we zoom in a bit more, we can see that South Carolina itself has seen a significant acceleration of growth just in the last several years since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, South Carolina ranks #1 in the country, not just in the Southeast, #1 in the country in terms of the rate of increase in its population growth between 2019 and 2022. So whether we're looking regionally or even nationally, or right here in South Carolina, we see the benefits or the potential benefits resulting from changes in population trends and migration patterns within the United States and within South Carolina, and particularly how it adds to the opportunity for long-run economic growth. So that's point #1. We can see that the port facilitates and enables these business activities that are the primary drivers of growth in South Carolina. Point #2, why is the South Carolina Ports Authority a principal asset for South Carolina's economy? That comes down to the sheer volume of economic activity that it supports if we look at the total economic impact. SC Ports maintains a sizable economic impact that extends statewide, as Barbara mentioned. It's not just about one particular region. We do see a true statewide economic impact. And we can summarize that very, very easily by looking at some top-line numbers from the report. And the big takeaway here is the $86.7 billion impact that South Carolina Ports offers to the state of South Carolina as of 2023, which is a sizable increase of about 37% since 2019. And you can just see the practical implications of this looking at the type of job creation and labor income creation that we see associated with that. $86.7 billion, 260,000 jobs, and close to $18 billion in labor income for South Carolinians. Now, this is a big number, and of course, this isn't just about the port operations themselves, although port operations certainly is a significant component. But a lot of this is about the port users as well, the business activities that are only possible in South Carolina because of access to the port, either through operations that require global supply chain or through the distribution channel as manufactured goods are produced in South Carolina and then they're shipped to customers all over the world. So port users and the port operations are included in this number, and both matter greatly. And we can contextualize this as well. $86.7 billion, again, clearly a very large number, but sometimes we can get a little hazy when we get into the billions and we're not really sure, what does that really mean from a very practical perspective? And the easiest way to see this is just in terms of the number of jobs. What do we mean by 260,000 jobs? What type of impact does that have? Well, it turns out that SC Ports supports directly or indirectly 1 out of every 9 jobs across South Carolina. 1 out of every 9 jobs in South Carolina. So a very significant impact that you can see statewide, 1 out of every 9. So a significant footprint for the state of South Carolina. Now, zooming in a bit closer to home here in the Midlands, we can also see what percentage of this impact is reflected locally. And again, as you see here, the impact is significant as well. About 25% of the total occurs right here in the Midlands region in the 16-county area that you see highlighted. So that represents about $22 billion total, or about 66,000 jobs within the 16-county Midlands region. And again, we've seen a sizable increase in 2019. Comparable to what we've seen at the state level, perhaps slightly higher here at 43%. But the point is that when we look at the influence of SC Ports across the state of South Carolina, this truly is a statewide presence across all 46 counties, including the 16-county Midlands region. And in fact, we see significant job creation here locally as well. So again, putting it into context with respect to employment, we see 1 out of every 9 jobs in the Midlands region also supported directly or indirectly by SC Ports. So very comparable to the type of influence that we see on the state's economy. We also see on the Midlands economy, on the 16-county Midlands region. One final point, one final statistic that we can look at to really sum up the sizable impact that SC Ports has on the state of South Carolina is 73.2%, which is the economic impact that we see contributing that comes from the contribution of local businesses. That is to say, if we look at the export volume that flows out of South Carolina, the exported goods, about 73% of them are produced, have a point of origin right here in South Carolina, which shows that SC Ports is supporting local business activity. Local business activity. So most of the goods that are exported, again, are produced right here. So when we talk about the economic impact, when we talk about that $86.7 billion influence, when we talk about port users, you can see that a majority of this activity is enabling manufacturing operations and production that is occurring here at home in South Carolina. So local support for the local economy. Point number 3, what is the third way that we can see that SC Ports is a principal asset for South Carolina's economy? SC Ports supports high-wage, high-quality jobs. So we can go back to that 1 in 9 jobs in South Carolina or here in the Midlands region, 260,000 jobs across the state of South Carolina. What is the nature of these positions? What can we say about this? Well, it turns out there's quite a bit we can say about these positions, but I just want to provide briefly a couple of comments here. First of all, we see that these are jobs that pay a significant wage premium over the average position in South Carolina, in effect bringing up the average wage for South Carolina. So if we look at these 260,000 jobs, we look at the different industries that are supported, we see an average wage premium across the board of about 23%. 23% wage premium across all jobs associated with the South Carolina Ports Authority, with SC Ports, compared to the average wage in South Carolina as a whole. And we also see that a significant percentage of these jobs are representing all of South Carolina's population, where we see that more than 1/3, or about 36% of the jobs supported either directly or indirectly by SC Ports, are held by women and minorities. So a diversity of employment as well. So high quality, high wage positions across the board when we think about these 1 in 9 jobs in South Carolina, or the 260,000 positions in South Carolina that are tied directly or indirectly to SC Ports. Finally, point number 4, why is SC Ports a principal asset of South Carolina's economy? SC Ports improves the competitive landscape of the southeastern United States. So again, I've been asking you to kind of zoom in and zoom out a little bit this morning as we've talked about South Carolina or the Midlands or the Southeast, and now we want to zoom out and talk about the Southeast for just one more moment. If we look at SC Ports, as I mentioned, 73% of the exports that go out of South Carolina are of an origin point here in South Carolina. So SC Ports largely supporting local businesses, but not just local businesses. We also see that SC Ports improves the competitive landscape of the entire southeastern United States, because there are port users that exist throughout the Southeast. They're not exclusively tied to South Carolina. And so we can measure and model this as well, and we can see the influence of SC Ports expand even further. Businesses located in South Carolina's neighboring states also use SC Ports facilities, which you can see here further increases the total impact by nearly 12% overall. Now, most of this is going to be in our neighboring states, of course, of Georgia and North Carolina, but this extends more broadly as well to the southeastern United States as a whole. And that increase of about 12% increases the total economic impact of SC Ports to close to $97 billion total. Again, $86.7 billion in South Carolina, $96.8 billion for the southeastern United States as a whole, increasing the total employment base to close to 300,000. So a significant influence on the Southeast as a whole, improving the competitive landscape of the Southeast and of South Carolina. So, wrapping up, getting back to the bottom line, right? What is the principal claim here? And that's that SC Ports is a principal asset of South Carolina's economy. No question about that. And we've seen that in a number of different ways. 4 key ways that we can see it. Remember, SC Ports enables and facilitates business activity that supports industries that are primarily responsible for growth in the state, advanced manufacturing, which we've seen over the previous decade and which will continue to drive our growth going forward, and retail and distribution-based businesses, as we see the increasing importance of those those businesses because of more and more demand as more people are moving to this region. And both of those suggest that SC Ports is going to become even more important for long-run economic growth going forward than it has been in the previous decade. Secondly, we see the sizable economic footprint, again, $86.7 billion, 1 in 9 jobs. These are high-quality, high-wage positions that we've seen. And finally, SC Ports also increases the competitive landscape of the southeastern United States. So regardless of how we look at it, we see that SC Ports is critical for the success of South Carolina. That's going to continue to be true and be even more true in the coming decade. And so we look forward to seeing what SC Ports does as we move forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Von Nessen, for your work to highlight our state's growth and all the jobs associated with it. You know, as businesses, we strive to define our value to our stakeholders. And really, Joey does that for us. He defines the value that we represent in South Carolina and then is able to articulate that to our stakeholders. And that allows us to explain the return on investment that you make in port infrastructure here in South Carolina. So it's critical for us. So now let's bring this data that Joey just shared to life. The cargo moving through a port is the reason we operate on a day-to-day basis and why we run. It's why we invest in infrastructure. We are so proud to move products for some of the most innovative companies in the world: Walmart, Target, Amazon, BMW, Volvo Cars, Mercedes-Benz Vans, Michelin, Boeing, Adidas, and International Paper, just to name a few. Today, we have the honor of hearing from a longtime customer with an incredible success story: Michelin. You know, Chris, you brought us to the dance. You were one of the foundational customers that helped South Carolina ports define our value, not just to our state, but to the world. Here to lead the conversation is our Chief Commercial Officer and Vice President of Marketing, Byron Miller, who's been with our port for 30 years. Please help me welcome Byron Miller and Mission Executive Chris Hicks to the stage.
So I'm not like Carl. I don't have a halo. The sun's great now. Can you guys hear me okay? I know we're moving to different mics. Is it all good? Awesome. Well, thanks. Again, my name's Byron Miller with the South Carolina Ports Authority. As Barbara referenced, I've been at the port for 30 years. I'm a proud South Carolina native. I'm one of the few that was able to grow up here and stay here, and I'm very proud of our state. As Barbara referenced, Michelin really, I don't think, gets enough credit for what they did to put South Carolina on the map. If you think back, I guess it was the 70s, when Michelin first located to our state, they were the forerunner of foreign direct investment. This was long before BMW and long before even Bosch and many others. But you know, at South Carolina ports, we work with a number of companies on their supply chain objectives, trying to help them do business more efficiently, more productively, and more predictably. And make no mistake, our seaport system is a huge asset for attracting investment. We have a lot of great values as a state. We have productive people, we've got a strong pro-business climate, available land, great technical system. But one thing that we have that a number of other states don't have is a deep water productive seaport system. It's something Tennessee doesn't have and Kentucky doesn't have. It's a unique advantage that companies are able to leverage on a daily basis. And as Barbara and Dr. Von Nessen referenced, we got companies all across the state that rely on our port. A number of those companies here in the Midlands that you all know, and maybe some that you don't, but Kent Bikes over in Manning, Husqvarna and Zeus down in Orangeburg, sorry Chris, Continental Tire in Sumter.
Okay, it's okay.
Samsung and Komatsu up in Newberry, Element Electronics in Winsboro, Silvamo in Eastover, Fultex here in Columbia, companies large and small across many different industry segments relying on our ports to access their international suppliers and buyers. So To talk a little more about the Michelin example, we have Chris Hicks here with us today. Chris is originally from Canada, but he's a converted Southerner. So I remember when I first started working with Chris, it was, you see this for folks that come from the north down south, they start saying you all, then eventually it becomes y'all, once they're a real converted Southerner.
I don't know if I've gotten there yet.
So he's getting
We'll
there
see.
closely.
We'll see.
But really, Michelin is a prime example of how a company with multiple facilities all around the state uses our port and transportation infrastructure on a daily basis. So we'd like to talk a little more about that today. As you know, Michelin's a manufacturing giant. We talked about the opening in the 70s, moved the headquarters here in, I guess, the 80s.
Mid-'80s?
Mid-'80s, expanded into Lexington most recently, opened a new 3 million square foot DC in Woodruff in the upstate of South Carolina. So to talk more about that, we're glad to have Chris with us. So Chris, tell us a little about Michelin's production facilities in the state and specifically what you have in Lexington.
So from a big picture, within the state, we have 9 facilities. 7 are primarily dedicated to tire production. We have 2 facilities in the upstate that support them from a pure rubber manufacturing standpoint. But within the U.S., there's a total of 14. So you can kind of see where Michelin's footprint is, right? It's huge. So we have 2 facilities here in Lexington County, one for passenger light truck, another one for our mining tire segment. And they represent about 1,100 employees direct, okay? So, I mean, there's 2 facilities, but when you look at the production impact that they represent from an overall tonnage standpoint, it's probably about 54%, okay, just because of the type of product they're producing. So it's interesting from that perspective, and when we start talking about supply chain impacts, the flow of product, et cetera. So it's huge for Michelin.
So it's a huge presence. How does international trade play into those 2 facilities? Because you look after what's going in and out of them. How are they tied to the port?
So the port is a key component for Michelin, right? We have roughly 16,000 imports a year, okay? And that's primarily here in South Carolina between tires, which will funnel up to our 3 million square foot facility in Woodruff. That'll get redistributed throughout the U.S. and Canada. But we also have a portion, probably at least half of that, which will feed into our rubber production facilities in the upstate, okay? So we kind of talked about supply chain, global supply chain. Every supply chain is, let's say, unique in how they go to market, how they do their production, right? Some supply chains are local to a specific market. Some stay more global, right? So we have 2 facilities in the upstate that just take natural rubber, convert it, and will supply the rest of the Michelin network, right? So if we got 8,000 containers going up, and we talked about Lexington plants represent about 40%, so you got 8,000 containers going up, and then you're going to have 48% of that coming back into Lexington to be able to produce the tires that they produce. Okay, so our supply chain is unique. It has its daily issues, just like everybody else's.
So Michelin was one of the first users of inland port Greer. And just to paint this picture again, we don't really think about it. There's no rubber grown in the United States, right? So all the natural rubber's coming from offshore.
Correct.
Greer, inland port Greer, Michelin was one of the first customers there. So rubber comes in through the port, it's railed up to inland port Greer, it's processed, and then it comes back down to the Lexington plants. Is that right?
Correct.
So it really helps tell a picture that this is not just confined to one plant or one region or one county. This is statewide transportation infrastructure that's supporting your production here in Lexington, the same with a lot of other companies. Is that?
Correct, correct. And it's not only from the import side, right? It's the big advantage that Greer gives Michelin is also helps us from a sustainability standpoint, right? You know, it also helps because of the congestion on the roads. Think about it. That's 16,000 trips, right? That's round trips when you're importing cargo. That's moving from Charleston to the upstate. That's all over on the road, okay? So with the change of the Greer ramp, we were able to move a portion of that, right, via rail, and then take advantage of the carbon impact, which when you look at the numbers, the carbon impact on a move like that is about 67% drop in carbon. Okay, so it's huge, right? So we look at it from the perspective of it's right for the state, it's right for the people, it's right for the environment, right? So we also take it to the next level, right? That's just the imports. We're looking at it for the same thing for exports, right? Because we export out of South Carolina, the bulk of our exports, but it's probably in the range of 11,000 containers a year, okay? And what's interesting with that, probably 4,000 come out of our Woodruff facility, right, which we try to push through the Greer ramp. And then the remainder comes from our mining sector, which are the open-top containers.
So we see those open tops on the road every day, all of us do. You just got to ask the question, where are they going and how much do each one cost? How much does one mining tire cost?
Depends on the size. So it's interesting, right? Those tires can go anywhere from 10 foot to 13 foot, right? And we are shipping, tires domestically up into the oil sands in Canada, but we're also shipping tires to Australia, New Zealand, Peru, Chile, Europe. So it's global, right? I think last year we did about 6,000 containers, primarily out of Lexington, but we had some that come out of the Anderson facility as well. And they're all open tops. So it's all out of gauge equipment.
So we should all take pride that the world's largest and finest tire is made in Lexington, South Carolina. And we should also remember when we see that intermodal train running through the middle of downtown Columbia, that it's also connected back to Lexington. So let's be patient with it. Shifting gears a little bit, we all witness in this room the impacts of the pandemic on the supply chain, whether it was hand sanitizer and toilet paper or port congestion or other things. Obviously, at South Carolina ports, we take great pride in working directly with our customers on solving for their supply chain needs. Maybe take a moment and talk about what we did during the pandemic with Michelin to help those mining tires get to market.
So you're referring to all the disruptions in supply chain
There were a few,
activities, right?
yes.
So, yeah, it's interesting. One of the big things is, Michelin is key on partnerships, right? And, we have a great partnership with the port, and whenever you have disruptions, you got to have collaboration. You got to have groups that want to think different, right? But you got to have the conversations. You got to have them regular. So when we started seeing the disruptions, and COVID brought on a lot. Trust me, that was a lot of chaos worldwide. So we got behind on our exports for mining tires. So there was a lot of discussions, and we ended up working on a solution with the port's help to do break bulk shipments, which is something that the company has never done with these big mining tires, right?
So basically, instead of moving it inside of an open-top container, we're just going to handle tire by tire.
Exactly. It's, I remember the day we got the call from, I think it was David Kerr. It said, you guys got to slow down. You got our terminal full of tires. And I mean, if you were to drive across the bridge and look at Columbus Street, all you saw was black donuts sitting on the terminal, right? We had ships that would come in, would load up 800 tires, go to Australia, right? We shipped, I think, equivalent that year of about 1,000 containers worth of tires.
Several thousand tires
Yeah.
went out that way. Well, we have to get creative. Overall, how important is international trade, would you say, and the port network to Michelin?
It's huge, right? You got to go back to Michelin has a global supply chain, so we don't produce all tires for North America, right? We produce tires that go offshore, but we also have to bring in tires that we don't produce, right? It's about efficiencies. So, what makes sense from your go-to-market policy, and how do you make it work? So international activity is huge for Michelin.
In fact, also, so is that infrastructure investment that Barbara referenced earlier. This all comes back at the end of the day to wise investments at our General Assembly and that our board has made in rail infrastructure, seaport infrastructure, harbor deepening, inland ports, Navy base intermodal facility. We're constantly preparing for that next generation of trade growth in South Carolina. We appreciate Michelin's business. We're committed to growing with you. We look forward to serving your business and others. And I would ask that you please join me in thanking Chris Hicks.
Thank you.
Carl?
Thank you.
And that's good stuff. Thank you all very much. Chris, appreciate your help today. Joey, thank you. Barbara, Byron, thank you all very much for being here. A couple quick housekeeping things, and then we're going to wrap up. It's on a monthly basis, we try to recognize a partner who's been doing great things for us and supporting us. And I want to thank Cool Care Heating that they're here today. I want to thank Cool Care for all they're doing. Love to grab a picture after this, if we don't mind, but appreciate you and all that they've been doing for us at the Chamber. Couple highlights coming up. We've got a partner engagement next week at with the Restaurant Lodging Association at Hanabi Hibachi. Try to say that a couple of times fast, right? But on the 18th at Hanabi Hibachi. Also, I'm excited, special episode of Coffee with Carl on Friday with my friend Carlos Phillips up in Greenville, and Brian Dearberry from the Charleston Chamber will join me at Coffee with Carl on Friday morning at 9 a.m. And we'll be back here on the 23rd in this room for our small business breakout. So with that, a couple thanks, not only to the port, Joey, thank you, but also want to thank Brad Shanks here with the Fireflies. Thank you, Brad, for letting us use your wonderful facility. We appreciate it very much. A packed house today, so we thank Brad and the team for all they do for us as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my friends at the Greater Casey West Columbia Chamber, Tim and Angel at the Lexington Chamber, and Bob Morgan, State Chamber. Bob, thanks for being here, and thanks for your leadership at the State Chamber. So we appreciate all of y'all being here with us today. Great presentation. Y'all have a great week. Thank you.